Good morning. It is Wednesday, June 23rd, 2010. My name is Jim Mayola, and it is my pleasure to be interviewing Jan and Earl Hersh from Carroll County. No longer in Carroll County, but from Carroll County. Now, Jan and Earl, how are you today?
We're fine.
Good.
Thank you.
Just fine.
Excellent. Well, let me start with Earl first and ask, how old are you? Do you remember what year you were born?
1932.
1932. And were you born in Carroll County?
Yes, I was.
Okay, whereabouts?
In our home in Ebbville,
Okay.
right outside of Manchester.
Right outside of Manchester in 1932. So you grew up in Carroll County. I guess you went to grade school
In
yeah,
Manchester, yes.
in Manchester. What was it like to be a young boy in Manchester in the 30s and 40s?
Well, we were on a farm, and most of the people were farmers back then.
Okay.
On that, but it was just something you did. You know, everybody went to school.
Mm-hmm.
My parents were very, very intent on all of us getting an education,
Mm-hmm.
because back when they went to school, they didn't get that.
Right.
So they were very considerate of having us go to school. And after school, we had to go home and do the chores around the farm.
Okay, and what kind of chores did you have, Earl?
A lot of different chores. One of the ones I had to do always was like in the hay mow. We had to get the hay down for the animals, and we had a silo, and we had to get the silage down for the cattle.
Right.
On that, and then we had to clean stalls and bed the animals, and most of it was farm work.
Mm-hmm. Now, what kind of a farm was it? What did you do on the farm?
Just multi-farming. It was a dairy farm.
Okay.
And back in those days, we had 14 dairy cows. That was considered an average-sized farm in those days,
Sure.
where you milked the cows by hand every morning
Okay.
and evening.
Right.
And we raised different types of crops. We raised our own corn and wheat,
Mm-hmm.
and we always had a small field of peas, which the canning factory would come in and cut and shell, and that was a money maker.
Absolutely.
Other than the cow milk,
Right.
that's the only thing we had for income in those days.
Now, the canning factory was located where?
Melrose.
Uh-huh.
It was Gradman. The owner was from Baltimore City, but it was a local, and most of the workers there were local people.
So you'd plant the field very early in the spring with peas, and the peas would come up, and then they would bring the workers in and do the...
No, you cut them yourself.
You cut 'em
And you
yourself.
took them down to a vinery,
Okay.
which was in Botlands Valley,
Mhm.
and they'd haul them there and then ship the pea back to the canning factory, for them to can and make money.
Right.
That was, other than the milk from the cows,
Mhm.
that was the only money maker we had.
And you could only do one batch of peas a year
Yes.
because of the weather we have
Yes,
here. Yeah.
right.
Yeah. So what did you do with that field after the peas were planted? Did you just replant?
Just let it sit there
Just
and
let it sit.
wait for next year.
Okay. All right.
We did have a little truck patch, they would call it,
Sure.
where you grew your own vegetables
Sure.
that you were going to eat, the potatoes and
Mhm.
tomatoes and things like that.
But that was primarily for the family.
Right, definitely.
And everything you could can and put up was put up.
Everything we ate practically
Yeah.
was grown on, on the farm.
Right.
In fact, I tell the story sometimes. In wintertime, we never went to the grocery store for the months of December, January, and February. We had, quote, a large can in the attic where we had salt and sugar,
Mm-hmm.
because those you couldn't grow.
Right.
And everything else we ate, we grew.
No kidding.
And we butchered a steer and 3 hogs.
Mm-hmm.
So we had our own pork and beef, and we just lived off the land.
Right. Now, did you put the pork and beef up? Did you smoke it or salt it, or how did you have
Both.
it? Uh-huh.
Both. You'd, of course, after butchered, what we call butchering,
Mhm.
cut them up and everything.
Right.
You'd salt them down. Some things, other things you'd smoke
Mhm.
in the smokehouse to keep, and you'd put it in crocks, which we'd call pudding in those days. I don't know what they call it today, but this is ground up meat,
Sure.
and you'd keep it in crocks for the through the winter.
Right.
But everything you had, you ate.
Yeah. And that would keep.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Now see, today we have freezers and refrigeration. You're talking about the time before refrigeration.
Didn't have refrigeration, right?
Yeah.
We had some things you'd keep in an ice box,
Mm-hmm.
and you'd get ice, when you had it. Put a hunk of ice in there, and then put the meat and things in there to keep it.
Right. Wow. Fascinating. Now, did you also do some of the milking, Earl?
Yes, I'm sorry to say, I always had 2 cows to milk, and that was about 4 to 5 in the morning and about 5 to 6 in the evening.
And we're talking 7 days a week, aren't we?
Yeah, you didn't miss any days.
That's right, because they'd let you know.
In fact, even back in that time, my father and mother was always interested in baseball. And of course, back in those days, Detroit was their favorite team, but we'd always go to Washington one time a year to see the old Washington ball club play. They were in the American League and big time then, but on that. And what we would do, we'd go down there on a Sunday afternoon, milk the cows in the morning, go down there, see the game, and then come home. We'd get home about 6 o'clock, and we'd milk the cows again.
Sure.
But that's the only time you could get away.
Yeah. Now, was that the Senators? The Washington
Yes.
Senators? Yeah.
Back in those days. Yeah.
Wow.
Old Griffith Stadium.
Absolutely, yeah. Wow.
Long time ago.
Yeah, now that was an all-day trip.
Yes, it was.
All-day trip to go
Yep.
down, yeah. Wow.
But then you could park on Main Street right outside the stadium,
Mm-hmm.
and you didn't have to worry about vandals or anything.
Right.
It was a different type culture.
Different world.
Yes.
Yeah, different world. Well, Miss Jan,
Yes,
when were you born?
I was born in 32.
Okay, so you're the
Okay.
same age then. pretty
He's
much.
6 months older than I.
Oh, I can tell just by looking at him. Yeah.
I was born on my grandfather's farm, which is now the location of Manchester Valley High School,
No kidding.
and lived there with my parents for a while, and then they moved to Manchester. But my grandmother kept me because my mother was a working mother in those days,
Okay.
and my father helped my grandfather on the farm.
Right.
So
Okay.
I was kind of raised by my wonderful grandmother.
Okay.
And let's see, and then we moved to Manchester, a half a mile up the road.
So you moved from the country to the city.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I went to school at Manchester Elementary, and that's where I met him in first grade.
No kidding.
Yes, and he was horrible.
I bet. I'm not surprised. So the two of you have known each other from grade school. You were
Yes.
friends from grade school.
Yes.
A long time.
And
Yep.
in those days, you started school in the first grade, and you stayed with the same
Right.
group of students
Yeah.
all the way through.
That's right.
Yeah. So your friends were your friends,
Yeah.
became your friends forever.
Yeah.
How wonderful.
I moved to Hanover in my junior year
Mhm.
of high school, and that's when he went to Westminster High School because he wanted to play football,
Yeah.
and Manchester didn't have that
Uh-huh.
program. So we were together basically, 9, 10 years
Mhm.
through school.
As schoolmates.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, were you boyfriend and girlfriend during school, or just chums?
Later.
Just
Later.
Yeah. Okay. I bet it broke your heart when he went away to play football, didn't it?
I'm not sure about that.
Or were you relieved?
She left first.
Yeah, I
Okay,
did.
that's
I left
right,
first.
okay.
My parents moved to Hanover.
So, as a young lady growing up, I guess on a farm when you first started out, you had chores too, didn't you?
No, I was
No
spoiled rotten.
You were?
Yes.
Okay.
My father and grandfather and grandmother took care of the chores,
Mhm.
and I got to love the farm just
Oh,
for
okay.
the farm.
So now, was it also a dairy farm, or was it?
I'm trying to. Yes, it was because
Okay.
I mistakenly. If you saw a picture of Manchester Valley High School before the excavation and all
Mhm.
that, the farm and the outbuildings were on one side of the road, and the house, which still stands today in a deplorable condition, but it was on the other side of the
Mhm.
road. And I was always told as a child, if you go over to play in the farm part of it, please close the gate.
Mm-hmm.
One day I didn't,
Oh.
and the cows
Animals
all
get out, yeah.
Cows all got out,
Yeah.
went across the
Oh.
road into the apple orchard,
Of
which
course.
is a no-no.
Of course, yeah. All
So-
the good fruits were there.
So
Ooh.
I learned
And-
my lesson
and-
very
and-
well.
And what were the consequences, might I ask?
I can't remember. They didn't spank me. They
Okay.
weren't spanking kind of people, but
Okay. Well, that's good.
I'm sure I lost some privileges of some
I'm
kind.
sure you did. Okay.
Yeah.
What did you do for entertainment?
I was an only child for 12 years.
Okay.
I had to entertain myself,
Okay.
and we didn't have much money,
Mhm.
so I did strange things. I would go down by the creek and try to catch little minnows, and I had my dolls, but I
Mhm.
wasn't much interested in dolls. My grandmother tried to teach me how to be a baker, and she did the best she could with me. But I was young, you know, I
Right.
was 8, 9 years
Sure.
old, so just entertained myself in various ways. Yeah.
Now, did you play with schoolmates? Were you close enough to any
No.
friend?
No.
Okay, so you were just kind of on
Yeah,
your own.
yeah.
All right. Well, you turned out okay.
I guess.
Now, did you guys have a radio in your house?
I'm trying to remember. Yeah, my grandfather had a radio.
Mhm.
Big, huge. You know how
Right.
they worked in those
Sure.
days. I didn't listen to it. Trying to think
Because
of.
this is way before television.
Oh, heavens, yes.
Yes, absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. Now, telephone?
No, our house did not
You
have
did
a
not
telephone.
have a telephone. Yeah.
When we moved to Manchester, as I said, was right up the road. We wanted to use a phone. We had to go to the neighbors, and that was
Mhm.
one of those party lines
Sure.
where everybody listened to what everybody else was talking about.
Sure. That was
But-
their entertainment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but we didn't have much need for a phone, so
Mhm.
that was a rare occasion to have to go next door and use the phone. So, yeah.
But people stayed connected because they saw each other.
Yeah.
They did things together. Okay.
And that wasn't all bad.
No, no, that's true.
Yeah.
Now, you talked about going early, you talked about going to the ball games, but there were things that happened in the community that were community kinds of events, weren't there? Did you guys have like carnivals in
Oh,
those
yeah.
days, or fairs, those kinds of things?
The Manchester Carnival was always a biggie.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the big affairs.
Right.
On that, we'd go in there one evening, but we lived out, like I told you, out there in
Country.
Melrose in the
Mhm.
country.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't do much traveling, you know. On this, I tell the story a lot of times. In wintertime, we'd buy a big lard can full of salt and sugar,
You said that.
Yeah, that's fine.
and we'd just
Yeah.
not go anywhere. We
Right.
wouldn't go off the farm.
Well, and now how were winters? I know we just came through a very hard winter. Do you recall that the winters were harsher than they were typically here now?
I recall going sledding. There was a hill across the road from our house in Manchester. And in those days, I can remember when the snow started to melt, it would get a hard crust on
Mhm.
top. I don't see that much of that anymore.
Right.
And you could go sledding right on top of the
Wow,
snow.
yeah.
It was great.
Yeah, because what I find interesting is that, you know, you talked about you'd be home and you'd kind of stay home, you'd kind of hunker down for 3 or 4 months. And no, you'd plan, living on a farm, that you would get in all your crops and get in all your stuff and have all the animals taken care of. And know that you wouldn't be coming out for 90 days. You know,
Right.
you're kind of right there, so you made sure you had everything at home that you need.
The only thing you had to do was make sure the milk truck could get through
Mhm.
to pick up the milk from the
Right.
cows.
Okay.
And there were many times when, well, back in those days, all the farmers worked together.
Right.
You know, whether it was reaping their crops or, but like the milk truck, if we got a big snow, they'd be up early in the morning. Everybody had a shovel,
Mhm.
and you'd just shovel up the road so the milk truck could get in.
Sure.
And everybody helped everybody else, even the people that didn't have cows,
Mm-hmm.
but they all pitched in.
Yeah.
It was a nice working agreement.
Yeah, because that was important. That was your income.
That was
Those
it.
Cows were your income.
That was the
yeah.
only
Right.
money you had,
Yeah.
right?
And that milk was important to the people who didn't have cows because they needed the milk. Just
I'm sure, yes.
Yeah. So it was part of the economy, part of the local economy. Now, you went through grade school and locally, and you went through high school. And Earl, you went and started playing football at Westminster.
My senior year, I transferred from Manchester to Westminster, and two of my coaches, Herb Ruby was the coach that was at Manchester when we were there, and then he went over to Westminster and started a football program, and then Tommy Hickman became the coach at Manchester. Well, they both have stories as far as I'm connected, because Tommy Hickman was a graduate of Westchester, Pennsylvania, and he took a liking to me and really ended up getting me in school up there to go to school at Westchester. Mr. Ruby wanted me to play football, and I did, and I loved him too on that, and he treated me like a son practically on this. So I went to Westminster. But Tommy Hickman, you know, I don't want to say anything that, you know, I was any better than anybody else, because I wasn't. But I was a halfway decent athlete leaving Manchester, his team, to go to play against him. And yet he was so nice. He's the one, you know, got me into Westchester. up there. Just a wonderful person and was very nice. And of course, Mr. Ruby was like a second father to me. He liked me and I liked him, and he did a lot of things for me too. So I was really blessed with two good people.
Yeah, it's nice to have a mentor, somebody
Yes.
that takes you under their wing and shows you the ropes and helps you and kind of encourages you. When you stray from the path, they push you back in the right direction. It's very important.
And I can continue one strip further in that. My coach at Westchester, Glenn Killinger. Some of the people listening to the program will remember. He was a crusty old guy from Penn State. I mean, he was tough, baby. Physically tough at practice. And I know the first practice I was out there playing a defensive halfback, and some big tackle fell on me. And I was going to run home that night, baby. I had the wind knocked out of you. You know how you feel. I said, this isn't for me. But I hung on a little bit. But he was very, very strict, very difficult, on this. He'd get you and shake you, but he took an interest in me too. Not that he treated me any better, but he helped me. He got me in the blue-gray football game and got me some honors, and just I was really, really blessed in life to have good mentors.
Well, you worked hard too.
I don't know about that, but it was hard work, I thought.
Well, we used to do that in careers, and it was a different time. We used to have apprenticeships, where if you wanted to learn to be a blacksmith, for example, or a plumber, you would go to somebody who already knew how to do it, and they would teach you. You'd be a young person learning the trade, so to speak. And I guess that's what happened to you in sports.
Right.
You had somebody that was more mature, that knew what you needed to do, and could look at you and watch you and observe and help you along. So
I was blessed that way.
Yes, you were. So you started off in Westminster High School playing football, and from there, what happened?
Went to Westchester.
Okay.
Played football and baseball there. As I told you, I got to play in the blue-gray football game at the end of my career.
Now, where is Westchester?
Right outside of Philadelphia.
Okay.
It's still there.
It's a university now.
Okay.
University now, but always had good athletic programs, and they were a physical education school.
Okay.
Elementary and physical education.
So you got a degree in physical education?
Yes.
And so you could, when you came out of there, you could teach?
Teach. I taught right out of school. I graduated there, and I guess it was
53.
the end of May or June '53, and Mr. Sam Janis was superintendent of schools here in Carroll County. And I come home, and he got me a job right there.
No kidding.
Yeah, on that. And just each year, then I played professional baseball. But each year when I would come back from baseball, usually the end of September, they'd always have someone that would quit or they'd have to get rid of. And they had discipline problems. They put me in there and figured we wouldn't have any.
Yeah.
So that's how I started my teaching career.
So you played professional ball during the summer,
right,
and taught during the winter.
Yes.
It worked out.
Very much so.
So tell me a little bit about how you got into professional ball. How'd that happen?
Well, I forget the gentleman's name anymore, but he was a friend of Glenn Killinger's, my coach at Westchester. And when I graduated, he got me a big bonus signing with the Milwaukee Braves.
Okay.
Well, they were the Boston Braves back then, but the Braves on that. And it was for $500. And that was a big bonus, For us it was, let's put it that way, on that. But anyway, I went to spring training the next year in baseball. We went down to, I'm trying to think, Jacksonville. And this was the Milwaukee, it was the Boston Braves, I think it was then.
Yeah.
That was their AAA training camp.
Okay.
Went to training there and met some nice people. Chuck Tanner for one down there on that, and a couple of other guys. I don't forget all their names on that. And I played the first year of ball at Evansville, Indiana. And that was a Class B team of the Braves. Played there for an old gentleman named Coleman on that. Very nice old gentleman on there. And of course, my wife came out with the family. And we lived there, for the summer. Then we moved back home and teach, and then the next year I was invited to spring training with the Major League team, Milwaukee, down in Bradenton. And we went down there, and the whole family went down that time. we lived out on an island out there outside of Bradenton. And wasn't real nice. My wife didn't like it too much. We used to have a lot of water bugs on the floor, and she'd be sitting on top of the tub when I'd come home. The bed. But anyway, it turned out real good. Got to meet some great people there in spring training. Henry Aaron, Eddie Matthews, and those guys. And you know, they were all super great people. They treated me like I was somebody. And you know, I was a nobody in there, scared to death.
Sure.
But it was really, really a good experience for me. And from there, you know, the next year I went to Atlanta and played, and then up to Wichita, and then got up for a cup of coffee, and wasn't quite good enough to stay, and went to Toronto for 2 years when they were in the International League. Played there, and then we had the 3 children by that time, and it was just a chore and didn't look like I was going to make it, so got out of baseball and went into teaching for good.
Full time. What year was that? Do you recall what year you left Toronto? And
I'm just trying to think.
And decided just to...
Wasn't it 59?
It was either 59 or 60.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you had a career of 8 or 9 years playing semi-professional to professional ball.
Yep.
Yeah. What was your most exciting moment as a pro ball player, would you say, or the most exciting thing that happened? What stands out?
That stands out. There's no question about that. When they took me up at the end of the season, back here in '56, I guess it was, we're playing Cincinnati, and Eddie Matthews sprained his ankle. So they moved Bobby Thompson, who was a left fielder, moved him into third base, and they started me in left field. I go out there in the first inning, we're at home, so we go out to the field, and you warm up, the outfielders throw back and forth, and Billy Bruton, he's a center fielder. He throws the ball over to me, and I throw it back to him, threw it clean over his head. I was so scared. But anyway, we come back in, and we're up to bat, and I forget, Johnny Logan might have led off, and Dittmer hit second, and then Henry Aaron hit third, and I was hitting fourth. And the first 2 guys made out, and I was praying Henry made it out because I wasn't ready to go over and bat. I was over in the on deck circle, scared to death. Well, he did. He made it out, so we go back out to the outfield, come back in, and I'm leading off the next inning. I don't even know where I'm at, you know, I'm so scared. But anyway, I get up there, and luckily I get a good pitch to hit, and I hit a double over the right fielder's head and pull into second base. And Jocko Conlon was referee in there at second. He said, "Nice hit, rookie." And then all the butterflies left.
Yeah.
From then on, it was all over, you know.
Wow.
On that. But it was a great thrill for me.
Yeah, what a great story. Now, I know you told me one time that you had the opportunity to meet Nat King Cole.
Well, that's another story. That's after I got taken over to Toronto.
Okay.
And they were in the International League. And Havana was in the International League then. They were part of the league. And we fly down there, Toronto, down to Havana for a 3-game series. And I forget what days of the week they were. But anyway, after the first night there, some of these guys that have been there for a while, they knew. So they said, "Hey, come along with us. You know, we're going to the club here on this." And it was a hotel, and I don't even remember the name. But Nat King Cole's playing on the piano for. So all these ball players, they seem to know the guy and all. They take me along. I go over there. And we're sitting there on the edge of the piano. And that dude played till 3 in the morning just for us.
No kidding. Wow.
Great experience there, yeah.
So you had
But then the next time we were supposed to go down there, the overthrow had started. So they moved the games over to Miami.
Sure.
They wouldn't let us fly in there anymore.
Yeah.
But it was a good experience.
I bet it was.
Yes.
What a story. Now, Miss Jan.
Yes.
You guys got together. Earl never did mention that when the 2 of you got married. So tell me about that. How did you finally get together and get married?
Well, as he said, he went to Westminster High School.
Okay.
I went to Eichelberger in Hanover. And we were still together. And then he went off to college and I didn't. I worked. And let's see, when did we get married?
I'd fly home on weekends to see her, though.
You didn't fly.
Not fly. I'd hitchhike.
You hitchhiked home to see me. We got married in May of 51.
Okay.
Yeah. and rented an apartment in Hanover. And then you were off to, I don't know. Well, anyway, he was gone a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't have any children at that time. And I stayed and worked. And then Michelle came along, our oldest one, and I moved in with his mother so she could help take care of Michelle.
Mm-hmm.
And then the first time we traveled and were together was Hagerstown. You forgot Hagerstown came before Evansville.
Mm-hmm.
We moved to Hagerstown,
Mm-hmm.
and then I followed him, moved to Evansville, and so on. I'd wait. There was only one spring training I went to, and at that time I was pregnant with our second child.
Mm-hmm.
But usually I just waited
Mm-hmm.
at home
Mm-hmm.
for him to tell me it's time to move to wherever we were moving, and so it was always an experience.
Mm-hmm. So
Where we were going to live in this town that we were moving to.
you felt like a military wife.
It kind of, yeah, it was that kind of a life.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's basically what I did. And then when he stopped playing ball, by then our youngest was school age.
Mm-hmm.
And being a person who can't just sit, I thought I need to do something
Sure.
here.
Okay.
I need to earn some income.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to work at Westminster High School in the cafeteria,
Okay.
the old Westminster High School.
Right.
And I worked there for about 7 years, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And it came time when they built a new high school.
Right.
And I was offered the job of managing the cafeteria. And I came home and I said to him, I don't think I want to do that. And I had to do something. And at that time, the state schools in Maryland were offering free tuition if you signed a contract to become a teacher
Okay.
for at least 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, sounds pretty good. At that time, our older daughter was getting ready to go to Westchester
Mm-hmm.
to college, so she went in that direction, and I went to Towson. Started my freshman year in Towson.
No kidding.
Yeah.
How old were you?
I think I was about 35.
Okay. Good
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah, so
So
finished.
you probably, I mean, that was pretty unusual in those days.
It was. I
Yeah.
felt like the mother of all
Yeah,
these
sure,
students.
sure.
But took me 3.5 years to get through, and then
Mhm.
I went right into teaching, and my first job was at Mount Airy Elementary Media Center.
Okay.
There was an opening there at that time, and I started in January because I got out of school in December.
Mhm.
And I was there 1.5 years, and then an opening came up in Hampstead Elementary, and that's where I went, and that's where I ended. So,
How long did you teach?
oh my, I knew you would ask me that.
22 years.
22.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't
Okay.
get to 25 because he was
Right.
getting ready to retire, and
Right.
we thought it'd be a good idea if I retired at the same time so we
Sure.
could travel.
So you taught for about 22 years,
Yeah.
but you were involved in the school system a lot longer than
Yeah.
that because you started
Yeah.
off actually working in the
The
cafeteria
cafeteria,
in
mhm,
Westminster.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was interesting because things were done so differently then.
Mm-hmm. Well, everything was done by hand.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
I
you
was
actually-
I was a baker.
Yes.
Yeah, I learned to bake there.
I mean, the cafeteria at the schools in those days was actually a kitchen. And
Yes.
you actually
Mhm.
did the cooking.
Yeah.
And the raw materials came in, you prepared the meals, and you fed the children.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
It's nothing was pre-prepared.
Yeah, and that was interesting. I made some good friends there, and a lady who taught me most of what I know about baking,
Mm-hmm.
and I enjoyed it. But I knew I didn't want a career there.
Right. Now you said you had 3 children?
We had 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me about your children.
Well, let's see. Michelle is the oldest. Where was she born? Boy, these
51.
questions are going back.
I know.
Where was she
Okay.
born? Oh, she was born when I was living with your mother while you were playing baseball.
Baseball.
Mm-hmm.
That was in 51, 52 maybe. And Larry was the second one. He was born on Green Street in Westminster. We had a small apartment.
Mm-hmm.
He was born while he was somewhere,
Evansville.
He was out there. And
Yeah.
I drove myself to the hospital. I
Okay.
didn't know how to drive. My great brother-in-law said, I'll teach you how to drive,
Mhm.
because I knew I would have to drive myself to the
Sure,
hospital,
sure.
which I did.
Mm-hmm.
And then Patty came along. We lived on South Colonial Avenue.
Okay.
She's the youngest, and she came along in 55.
Okay. Now you said you drove yourself to the hospital. Where was it?
Hanover Hospital.
I was going to say there was
Mhm.
no hospital.
No hospital in Carroll County.
Yeah.
My doctor was in Hanover, and
Okay.
so I drove myself
But
there.
you were comfortable with Hanover. You knew the town. 'Cause didn't you
I had
stay
spent 2 of my high school years there.
at the Eichelberger,
Yeah.
which is now the Art Center
Yes.
there. Yes. Very
Yeah.
interesting. Okay.
So,
What have your children done? I know one of them has stayed with the school system.
yes, Patty, the youngest one, Patty Haycock, is at Charles Carroll Elementary principal.
Mm-hmm.
Larry works for the Board of Education as a bus driver who takes special needs children to a special school in Laurel.
Mm-hmm.
And he also manages the custodial things at the mall, the
Mhm.
Westminster Mall. So he has 2 positions. Daughter Michelle is an office manager for a law firm in Rockville who deals with divorce and child custody suits. She has about 20 people that she's in charge of. So she's getting close to retirement age, which is hard to believe.
It is.
Yeah.
Isn't it? It's amazing. What an interesting life we've had.
Yeah.
Now, Earl, you got involved in sports in the Carroll County education system. You went away and you did sports out of state, and then you became a professional ball player. But then you came back and taught sports. You were the football coach for how many years?
I was football coach from 61 to 67, 6 years at Westminster High School.
Westminster High School.
And that's when Mr. Ruby, who was our coach, and football coach, took a job in central office.
Okay.
And he offered me, hit that job, or Mr. Janis was there then as superintendent, but the 2 of them together said, Earl, would you like this job?
Mm-hmm.
And it was a 12-month job.
Right.
Because back in those days, teacher salaries weren't real good.
Mm-hmm.
And we had 3 kids and everything, and he said, here, this would be and it was a tough decision for me because I love coaching.
Sure.
But I finally took the job and became the supervisor of physical education in the county, and was there until I retired.
So you supervised all the physical education
Yes.
in all the schools, elementary and high school?
Yes.
Okay.
And the sports.
And all the sports, yeah.
That's a big
And
job.
health.
Yeah.
Well, it is now, but
Yeah.
back then we didn't think of it.
And you
Yeah.
had health also. That was
Yeah,
part of
we had health.
Sure, you thought health was part of the package.
Yeah, yeah, they all went together, right?
Yeah.
But it was fun. I enjoyed. I didn't think I'd like supervising that much because when you participated all yourself,
Right.
it's a different ball game.
Absolutely.
But I had some great people
Oh, I'm
that were
sure.
physical education teachers
Mhm.
and made it fun
Yeah.
on that, and I really enjoyed it as time went on. I really enjoyed that aspect of it, and then the later years, things change,
Of course.
and we're old, and we don't change.
Yeah.
But it became more paperwork
Yeah.
than putting your arm around a person, telling them what kind of job they're doing,
Right.
and that wasn't my cup of tea. So we got out.
But you got to see the county evolve. You got to see the whole sports program really evolve from when you started. It was.
in
talk
fact-
about that a little bit.
Well, in fact, they didn't have women's sports,
There you go.
as a major program.
Mhm.
That was in the late '60s there, and tremendous amount of change
Mhm.
because you only had the 3 sports for each one,
Mhm.
and then it kept growing and growing and growing, and then you began having JV teams and
Right.
9th grade teams, and getting all the kids who wanted to get involved have a program for them
Mhm.
on that.
Sure.
And it was really good. We liked the program, and I think it was a very, very good program too.
Now, when you were a coach at Westminster High School, what other teams did you play? Did you just play county teams, or did you play outside the county?
Well, football, no one else had football.
Mhm.
So we played like Bel Air,
Mhm.
we played Gettysburg, and we played Fort Hill,
Mhm.
North and North. Well, it was Hagerstown. It wasn't North and South back then. And
Cologne.
yeah, we played DeLone, and we
Right.
played Hanover
Mhm.
a couple years. The teams that were fairly close,
Right.
on
Okay.
that.
So that's what you did as a coach. But then, when you became a superintendent, by that time,
Supervisor.
all the teams. I mean, all the high schools had their own teams then. I mean,
Yes.
eventually they evolved so that each of the high schools had teams. So then the high school teams would play each other, And then they play outside the county.
They have
I would suspect.
3 or 4 teams they could play outside. Of course, back then it was only I think 5 high schools at the time,
Right.
and then it became 6, and then 7, and now it's got many more of them. But that's not all bad, because actually the county can live in a sports program within the county if they have to.
Sure.
Where when you had to travel to Fort Hill and Hagerstown around, transportation became a problem.
Yes, that's pretty tough and expensive.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And time consuming. Now, sports has become a big thing in the county. If you listen to the local radio station, WTTR, they have the Sportsman of the Week. They pick a male and a female person that they highlight every week, and lots of sports. I mean, it's not just football and baseball, as you pointed out. There's also a big female component, which is wonderful.
Well, you got lacrosse, boys and girls, which is new, and they have a lot more girls programs, and to get a balance there, and that's good.
Yeah, and night games now, where in the past, I imagine most of the games were during the day. You didn't have lighted fields, did you?
The only place had lights was Westminster, the old stadium over there, but. Today you almost have to have those games because of the cost. Right. And the Board of Education, they don't have that much money from the state and the county on this. So to run all the sports programs, it costs a lot of money. And one thing I was always anti was a kid having to play, because I never thought that was right. But to survive, they had to do it, and so it's an expensive program, sports. There's no doubt about that. But I do think it fulfills a lot of things for kids growing up, whether it's a spectator or a participant. Yeah. You can learn a lot.
It's a very important part of growing up. It really is. It's a very important part of our culture.
I think so. Yes.
I agree. Now, as a student. Playing ball, was it hard to get into the team? I mean, how did they? You've seen every facet of it. You've been a student participating, you've been a teacher coaching, and then you've seen everything that's going on in the whole county. How were students chosen for that? I mean, they'd have to have an interest, but they'd also have to have some talent, wouldn't they? Were there auditions for that? How did that happen?
Usually have tryouts for teams, which is an audition really on that. And, the good ones stand out. They're going to be good athletes. But then you got the person, the average person who can become good but haven't had the experience in the past. So, it's a little bit of hit and miss. Sure. Of giving them a chance to show. But your tryout times are so limited that really a student today don't have much time to show their skills. And we're getting old, that, but they don't do much outside of the school program. They're pushing buttons now instead of throwing balls, if you get what I mean there. And
I do.
And that makes a world of difference.
It used to be that when we were kids, we would go out on the sandlot and we'd play ball on our time.
Right.
And that was great practice time, because you'd learn teamwork and you'd learn social skills, but you'd also learn the art of playing the game.
Well, you learn the skills of the game.
Right.
And you don't learn that if you don't do them.
Exactly.
And to think that you can watch a game and then go out there and do it. It doesn't work that way.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And so you probably had more talent coming in those days of kids who had the experience of doing. And so you didn't have to spend a lot of time teaching that part of the fundamentals, because they already knew how. You just hone that a little bit.
And a lot of people talk about the physical weight programs today and so forth. Well, in the old days you didn't need them, because that's what you did on the farm. And everybody practically lived on a farm.
Sure.
And if they lived in town, they had physical work to do. Where now there's no physical work. Right. And if you do live on a farm, everything's machine.
Yeah.
So the physical part of the body isn't prepared for the athletic programs in school.
Right, because as you pointed out earlier, you'd get up in the morning and you'd do your chores, and in the evening before you went to bed, you'd do your chores. And all of those chores required a lot of physical demands on you.
Quite.
So your body was already honed. So when you went to play, you could play hard.
Very true.
Yeah, and not hurt yourself.
Right.
And so you were more prepared. Now we have to go to the gym to work off all those extra hamburgers we ate.
And really, it's cost me to go to the gym.
Yeah,
Your fitness
it does.
places,
Yeah.
you got to pay to do it.
Yeah, it does indeed.
And we talk a lot about it, but you can ride up and down any street in any town, and you'll never see a neighborhood game anymore.
Yeah.
You don't even see kids
I don't
outside.
see kids playing anymore like they used to.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that I've seen as a change is that everybody's so busy. You know, everybody seems to have so much to do, and I guess the kids have so much to do as well. It's interesting that they do have the night games now. It gives kids a chance to perform in the evenings to get their games in. But it seems like our schedules have gotten so busy as compared to the way they used to be.
Too busy, really. But sometimes it's survival.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for a family.
Well, everybody has to work.
That's what I say. Depending what kind of job you have, fathers and mothers, you know, if they have a family, they don't make enough income to pay for that.
Mm-hmm.
So the child has to work to help with the income.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's a tough road right now on that.
Interesting times. So, what are the biggest changes that you've seen, would you say, since you were growing up, or since let's pick the time when you first started working, when you reached that age, when you were in your early 20s and you first started working and you reached that point in time. You're living in the county, and what would you say is the biggest change from that period of time to today? And Jan, why don't you go first?
Well, I was going back before that.
You can do that.
We earned money, he and I both,
Mhm.
picking green beans
Mhm.
at a
Okay.
cent-and-a-half a pound.
Okay.
And every once in a while, some ingenious person would put rocks in the sacks. And all you had to see one time was having your bean bag
Mhm.
emptied in
Mhm.
front of you, and you
Mhm.
didn't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Well, I never did that, of
Yeah.
course. I'm
Yeah.
pretty honest. But that one was before the 20s. Well, I didn't work outside the home, as I said, until my youngest daughter was school age.
Mhm.
Work-wise, I don't have a lot I remember other than the work I did in the cafeteria. But I remember neighborhoods. Your kids would go out to play
Mhm.
during the day, and you didn't worry about how far out of the neighborhood they were.
Mhm.
You knew they were down the street somewhere.
Right.
And they'd come home when they were hungry for
Mhm.
lunch.
Mhm.
But you didn't have to have your fingers on them all the time, you know. Are you going to this person's house or that person's house, and how long are you going to be there, and who's home, and all. That never even occurred to you because you knew the neighbors were good people,
Well,
you know.
you knew the neighbors would look out for them, and you knew they were with good kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they weren't likely to get in trouble.
Yeah.
So that was different.
Mhm.
Also, probably growing up, you knew that if you had done something bad, the neighbor was going to tell on you.
Right.
Or
Mhm.
so you didn't necessarily
Yeah.
do bad things.
No.
Yeah.
No, you were just being a kid,
Yeah.
good kid.
Yeah.
So,
So we were more interconnected then.
right.
Okay.
Right.
So that's been a big change.
Mhm.
How about you, Earl? What would you say is the biggest change that you've seen since you were a child? Biggest change in the community.
I think you've hit on it. You can ride in any town or any country, and you would really have to search to see any kid playing outside.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can just go up and down the streets or the roads. You don't see anybody outside anymore playing ball or playing badminton or whatever the game would be. You know, hide and seek or tag.
Yeah.
You just don't see them.
Yeah.
I don't have anything against the games, the computer games and everything, because it's a different time. But I think there's a time and place for it.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I just can't see a kid sitting there at that screen playing these games all day
Yeah.
and getting up, eating your meal and going to bed, or going back down and playing some more games and then go to bed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, physically that cannot be good for you.
I have to agree. Yeah.
I just and I don't know how it's going to change. You know, they talk about putting more physical programs in the schools, and that's great. But somehow you got to convince the mind that this isn't the way to go, that there's another avenue.
Part of it's habit, though. You know, you grow up. I know when I was growing up, I grew up on a small farm, and during the day, when we didn't have chores, of course, were physical, but
Sure.
we'd go out in the woods and run around
Yes.
and explore. And
Climb trees and all that kind of stuff.
And those kinds of things. Of course, I don't know if I don't want to use the word spoiled, that we've gotten spoiled, but I think about when I was a youngster, and I'm sure it was the same way with you. You know, you mentioned, Earl, that you didn't have refrigeration. You had an icebox. There was no such thing as a freezer. I mean, even if there were freezers, you couldn't afford to have one. We didn't grow up in a house with air conditioning. A luxury was a fan.
That's right.
So you open the windows and you let whatever air in. You had screens to keep the bugs out, but that was your air conditioning, the windows. So a day like today, when it's 90 degrees outside, you just go out and do whatever you had to do.
That'd be done.
Nowadays, if we have to drive in a car that doesn't have air conditioning, we feel that we're being inconvenienced.
You can't open those windows and let the air in.
No, it's really a different world than it used to be. And so people in general have enclosed themselves a lot more than they used to be.
And I think we're to the second generation of that. You know, that our kids that grew up, they were right on the borderline.
Right, yeah.
But their kids, you know, they've never experienced the wide open spaces and things on this. So I don't know where we're going or what's going to happen. But
see, I grew up I was born in 51, and so I grew up at an age when your children grew up. And so that was the age when we were getting televisions in our houses. And so you had a television in your house, I suspect. And so we thought when televisions were introduced to houses, they would be wonderful things for entertainment and for education and all these other things. And never thought that they would be those little boxes that would suck you in, and you'd spend so much time in front watching commercials and so little time outside doing the things that you used to do around the house.
It's really taken away from the physical.
It has.
Well,
and the social part of it.
And I recall walking everywhere. You walked everywhere, and our son would bike if he wanted to go play ball down at Vandenberg's Park. I don't think it's called that anymore. Get on your bike and go. Now you wouldn't tell a child to just get on your bike and go and not be there to supervise them.
Well, it's dangerous now. With all the cars on the road, it is dangerous to be on the road, because as a child, I used to bike everywhere, and I'd get calluses in places that, you know, I shouldn't have calluses, but it's from, you know, you just toughen up. I know that as a child, I don't know if you went through this as children, but in the summertime when school was out, you took your shoes off, and if you had your choice, you didn't put them back on except to go to church until school started again, you know, because you could run around barefoot, and you'd toughen up, and that's what you would do. Of course, you didn't want to do that around cows, because you get your foot stepped on, but or step in something. But yes, it's a different world. Well, what advice, you've worked with a lot of youngsters, both of you. You've had a lot of children come through your classes, and you've worked with a lot of children in teaching, and you've mentored a lot. And that was a while back, but and times have changed. They've gotten tougher. We don't have as much time in a day, and things are harder economically. But what advice would you give a child coming up today? Why don't we start with you, Earl? What advice would you give a youngster getting started today?
Well, it's tough, you know, but I think it would, if I had one thing, you'd have to organize time for physical activity, because that's the only way it's going to get done. You know, and there's reasons. They're not all good either. You know, you're about half scared to let your child out there today,
right?
Because of all the things that can happen.
Sure.
So you got to respect that end of it. But by the same token, sitting on that fanny all day long isn't a good excuse either. So whether we need more organized things or whatever, they need more time at physical activity. And the school systems, some of them have started some of that, but they seem to drop it right away, and I don't know why, but I think that would be a very, very vital part of
So
a child's growth.
So your advice to the children is get out there and do something.
Do something.
And your advice to the parents is support those
Yep.
activities.
Exactly.
Okay.
Definitely.
How about you, Miss Jan?
Well, being a media person with children, and this is exactly opposite, but I know there's so many educational materials out there that children can learn.
Sure.
But I still say read. Read. Just for the relaxation alone. And the written word to me is a lot more important than some of these other things the kids do.
Sure.
Of course, it doesn't involve a whole lot of physical activity,
Right.
but when you read, it gives you time to ponder what you've just read, or sometimes it just flashes by and you forget it. But that's because I'm old school.
That's okay. That's okay. That's a very valuable lesson and very good advice. A lot of people, I run into a lot of people right now that the only reading they do is maybe a newspaper or a magazine. They never pick up a novel to read or a book to read. And those are treasures. There's so much. And you know, it's nice to have your own imagination and use your own imagination, your own brain to visualize how you think that story would come out, rather than having somebody else tell you when you watch a movie.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Yeah. Now, I have to ask you something, Earl. You were a professional sports person, and I run into people all the time. You actually played professional ball, and there are so many youngsters today that just would believe that would be the end-all, be-all to be a professional ball player. What advice can you give them? To get there, what do they need to do to get there, and should they have a plan B?
Well, you know, the first answer is always, you got to work hard at it and stick with it. You know, don't give up right away, because there are different avenues to get there. The road's tough. It's not an easy road on this, but I think there's still chances for you to get there on that. And like I say, you got to be lucky, or whatever it is, get a break. But sometimes you make those breaks by being there and doing it.
Right.
So just get involved.
Okay. And there are many things that you can do besides being the pitcher for the team that you want to pitch for. For every person, here we're at the Community Media Center. For every person in front of the camera, there's 10 to 50 people behind the camera making things happen. So you can be involved in many different ways.
Definitely. And you don't have to be a star yourself to be involved.
Right.
You can help others to become the star if you don't have the physical skills.
Sure.
And, you know, there's a lot of avenues out there.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So, I bet you two are both involved in the community in different ways.
Well.
Do you stay active?
Okay.
What kinds of things do you do now?
Well, I'm playing golf too often.
She's involved in everything.
I'm learning line dancing, which I'm enjoying.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And what else am I doing? Too much, because I'm not home very much. Trying to think. I had 3 activities today. Oh yeah, I still go to a physical program, Curves, which you've probably heard about. I do that 3 times a week.
Yeah, good.
And we're enjoying our life, meeting new people.
Now you still stay active in your church?
Oh yes, yes.
Okay.
Not as active as we were because of the distance of driving.
Because you don't live in Westminster anymore. You're up in Homewood or Plum
Homewood.
Creek.
But we come down most Sundays for services.
Okay.
And
what church is that?
Westminster United Methodist Center in Main Street.
Right. Okay. So you stay connected with your community then.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. Any final thoughts? And you know, you guys have seen so many changes in this community from 1932 to 2010. It's been a dramatic change. I mean, you're talking about no telephones in most houses, very few, let's put it that way. The telephones had just sort of been introduced. No televisions. Many people that didn't have cars, you know, you either walked or bicycled to wherever you wanted to go. I didn't ask you, Earl, on your farm, did you use horsepower or did you have a tractor?
Both. We had an old Ford tractor. You used to have to crank it to start it, you know, and didn't have much except straight pulling.
Right.
But we had 2 horses and 2 mules, and we did most of our work with the horses on this, the plowing and stuff like that.
So we're going way back. We're going back
Yeah.
to farming the old-fashioned way. From you were really touching the soil. We're not talking tractors. We're talking humans and animals farming the land.
A quick story about the animals.
Okay.
We had a pair of mules. One of my jobs was, when I was a little tacker, was plowing a cornfield.
Okay.
An old sulky, where you get in,
Yeah.
hook the two horses up, two mules, and they plow. These mules were so smart, when you come to the end of the row, they turned themselves around. I didn't even
You
have to
didn't
do
have to
it.
do anything.
They just went back and forth.
And just knew just what to do. All you had to do was sort of line
That's
them up.
right.
How old were you, Earl?
Man, I was young then.
Yeah.
I was probably around 11, 12 years
Isn't
old.
that amazing?
Yeah.
You couldn't have an 11 or 12-year-old
Not
do that
today.
today. I mean, we've gotten so far away from that
Yeah.
Field animals anymore. Horses are for riding now. They're not. Very few.
You
people
don't,
have
you don't
work
see any
horses.
work animals
Yeah,
anymore.
Very few.
Nope.
Yeah, it's amazing. So
Yeah.
we've grown up in a different time. We were born before television and radio. I mean, radio was around, but I mean, it was an unusual. It wasn't unusual to have a home that didn't have any of those things. No appliances, houses with no electricity.
Mhm.
So we've seen changes, and they're wonderful changes. I mean, we've seen amazing things. Everybody has a car now. Everybody has a telephone now. Everybody has a radio. Everybody has a television. Almost everybody has a computer. So
At
we've
least
seen-
one of those.
Yeah, we've seen such an evolution in the things that we have and in our culture. I mean, you guys both grew up during World War II and during Korea
Yeah.
and during Vietnam.
And we were born in Depression times, so
Mhm.
we remember our parents struggling.
Mhm.
Shoes
Sure.
with holes in the soles
Sure,
that your
right.
father mended with
Mhm.
cardboard, so
Sure.
you could wear them to
Yeah,
school.
they'd last another couple of
Yeah.
weeks. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And just that's the way it was. Nothing ever got wasted. So, but we've seen some changes. We've seen some changes in our culture, and we've seen some changes in our style of life. I mean, in some regards, things are easier, but are they necessarily better?
I think the closeness, people being close to one another, doesn't exist that much. I mean, relatives, of course,
Mhm.
but it doesn't exist that much.
Mhm.
You really don't know your neighbor. I
Mhm.
mean, really know your neighbor.
Right.
And I don't know, I don't care for that much, but that's the way it is,
Yeah, it is.
So,
And it's sad that it's that way
Yeah.
because we were all so interconnected in I'm going to call them the old days,
Mhm.
than we are today.
Yeah.
I mean, you can live on a block and not know the people next door
That's
to
right.
you and not have any association other than see them once in a
Mhm.
while.
And you'd go visiting,
Mhm.
they don't do, well, I guess they visit, but not the way we visited, to spend the whole afternoon
Right.
with the family. And
Sure.
I don't know, it is different.
Mhm.
I don't say it's anything wrong with it, it's just different.
Yeah, there's a lot more of us.
It's true too.
Yeah, a lot more cars on the road.
Yeah.
Because you guys lived in Carroll County before we had 140.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Take it for granted, but the kids coming up today, the people that are going to be watching this video, a lot of them have no conception of that, no idea that it's been
Mhm.
such a dramatic change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dirt roads,
Yeah.
traveled dirt roads.
A lot of
Yeah.
dirt roads.
Yeah.
These
Went
are-
to a small church out in the valley, called the Valley, which still exists today,
Mhm.
but that was different,
Mhm.
I think the small churches are kind of fading out,
Mhm.
but it was a closeness there too. You
Mhm.
knew all those people who came to church
Sure.
and what their families were doing.
Mhm.
You go to church now, and you might know somebody sitting in your pew, but
Mhm.
maybe not.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest difference in society is that in those days you had to rely on other people
Mhm.
to get by,
Right.
where now everything's mechanical.
Mhm.
You can find something mechanical to do the job,
Right.
and you don't need anybody else. And in time, that just separates you from people.
Yeah, it does. We just had a really tough winter when people were snowed in for a couple of weeks because we had feet of snow rather than inches of snow, and it
Yep.
sort of brought some of that home. People
They had to.
hopefully pulled together a
Mhm.
little bit
Yes.
Yeah.
to try to help each other out. But that was something that we took as a matter of course in the old days.
Sure.
When you talked about bringing in the crops, that
Yep.
job was too big for one family to do alone. You had to get your friends and neighbors to help you out. And it made so much sense. It helped to pull the people together, but it also, you could get your crops in very quickly. A couple of days you had your corn in. Versus, and then you'd go on to your neighbor and help them do it, and then the next neighbor and help them do it, and you worked around.
You know, I think that's one of the biggest things young people have to understand. You know, like we lived in a little farm,
Mm-hmm.
but it didn't matter whether you had a 100-acre crop or a 20-acre crop.
Right.
Everybody went and helped.
Sure.
You didn't pay anybody because you had a bigger and
No.
used more. Everybody just did the job.
Right.
You went up and down the valley, helped each other out till everybody was done,
Right.
and that was it.
Yeah, and it was done.
Nowadays, they'd have a time slot out there.
Yeah.
Well, you were here 6 hours, and I was only there 2 hours.
Well, nowadays they do it with big machines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they hire the machines, and the machines
Yeah.
come and do it, and it's done. And it's done in a matter of minutes, what would have taken all day to do in the old days. And maybe we're more efficient, but that efficiency has cost us in the connections between each
Cost
other.
us that friendship.
Yeah.
I have a funny story I should have interjected
That's
early
fine.
on. You can
No.
fade it out. I guess I was 5 or 6 years old going in the first grade in Manchester School, and our farm was down there where I told you it was, where Manchester Valley School is now. Buses did not come. I walked to school.
Right.
And I don't know if you're aware where Manchester School is, on York Street in Manchester.
Mhm.
That was a long walk for
About
a
how
little
far?
kid. Yeah.
About how far would you say?
What, a mile and a half, 2
Probably.
miles for a 6-year-old
For a little
along the
Oh,
road.
okay,
Along the road.
yeah.
But anyway, the first couple of days of school, first day of school, my father drove me there. He had a little old Ford Roadster.
Mm-hmm.
He drove me to school, left me off at the front door of the school.
Yeah.
I was, as I said, an only child at that time, scared to death.
Sure.
First day of school. When he left, I walked all the way home.
You mean right from then?
From
You
there.
didn't even go to school?
I didn't go in the door. So I walked home.
Oh.
Well, that was not a good thing.
Yeah,
My
no.
grandfather was angry about that.
Mhm.
Next day, Dad took me again. He should have taken me inside,
Yeah.
but he didn't.
Yeah.
Left me at the front door and went home.
And you
I walked home again.
Ooh.
The family was out in the cornfield shocking corn, the way they used to shock corn.
Mm-hmm.
And I went out to the cornfield. My grandfather said, "What are you doing here?"
Mm-hmm.
I said, "I don't want to go to school."
Yeah.
Well, at that time there were big black buzzards flying around because we had a chicken house, and when they cleaned the chicken houses, the
Mhm,
buzzards
mhm.
would come. And he said, "You see those birds up there? And you come back here one more day," he said, "and you'll be gone because those birds will pick you up and take you away." Needless to say,
You were
I
terrified.
stayed in school.
She didn't like those buzzards.
You can cut that out. That was just a funny story.
Oh, no, that's a great story. That's wonderful. So you ended up going to school. You were
Yeah,
a
I
couple
did
of
go.
days late.
I did go.
You adjusted.
Yeah.
But it was different, wasn't
Yeah.
it? I mean, you were an only child.
Yeah, I
and
didn't
all of a
have
sudden,
neighbors,
No,
schoolmates,
and all of a sudden you're in a classroom full of these these
Yeah.
other kids who
Yeah.
are all alien.
Yeah, they were aliens,
Yeah.
especially this one. They only had like one class per grade at that time.
Sure.
so.
Yeah. So how many students in the class? Do you recall? How many would you
20,
get? About
22,
20.
something like that.
Yeah. So it was all the kids from the Manchester area.
mhm.
And farms and everybody.
Yeah,
Sure.
Yeah, a lot of new faces to
Mhm.
see.
Yeah. Now, in those days, did you have to go through how many grades? What was it?
11 in Carroll County, well,
Okay.
in Maryland,
Yeah.
and 12 when I went to Hanover.
Mm-hmm.
But you didn't have to go.
Right. Right.
No, you
Yeah.
could
I mean,
stop.
I know a lot of kids would go through the 10th grade, and that would be all they
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
There was a certain age group that
Yeah.
they'd stop.
hmm
Yeah.
I don't even know. I guess it was 16. I'm
Mhm.
not sure if that was the age.
Now, you had an elementary school and then a high school.
They were all together.
They were all together.
All together
Yeah.
with one school.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
And do you recall when you first went into school how large the graduating class was that year? I know this is an odd question, and
Yeah.
you may not recall.
Well, your sister was years ahead of you. I imagine they stayed pretty much with
Yeah.
the number because children would come in from,
Right.
move
So you-
in.
So
Well,
you'd have a graduating
Yeah.
class of 20 or 30,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah,
it
our
was pretty
class,
stable.
yeah.
hmm
Yeah.
We had about 30, I guess, in
Yeah.
our class. Yeah.
I remember when I went to a little school called Nanjamoy Elementary, which was in Charles County,
hmm
and I started in the second grade there because we had moved into Charles County, And that year was the last year that they had grades 1 through 12, and they had a graduating class of 12 in that school. And then they brought, at that time, they started bringing they turned those into elementary schools and brought them all to the 2 high schools in Charles County.
He had 12 grades. He's after us.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, that was 1958.
Yeah. That changed in 1950. There wasn't in Westminster. There wasn't a class of 1950 as graduates. They recognized them.
Right.
But the next graduating class was 51. So that was a change for me too, to go from that system. They had me in 10th grade for 6 weeks, and then somebody discovered that everything I was learning there I'd already learned in 9th grade in Carroll County. So they moved me up to 11th grade.
Oh, okay.
And then I missed 6 weeks of instruction. And the teachers really didn't.
Yeah. You caught up.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that was fine. That was that tells you something else too. That was a different time. Now you're locked into however old you are, and you have to stay with your age group.
Yeah.
In the older days, if they saw that a student was really a little more mature and
move them up,
had a little more homeschooling or whatever, for whatever reason, don't hold them back. Go ahead and move them up. Move them up to the next grade because it was good for them. So it's been a different world. Well, I really do want to thank you both for taking the time.
Thank you.
On a busy day. It's been a real treat to talk to you. Very interesting stories, and it's nice to reminisce. You bring back a lot of the history from the county, and it's nice that you've remembered so many things, and that you still stay active in the community. And I want to tell you that I really appreciate it, and your story will be archived. We'll save it for those others that are coming behind us to have a chance to listen to and to hopefully
I'm sure
gain something from.
100 years from now, there'll be some. They'll think we're weird.
We were in the dark ages.
It can't change as much as it did in our 50
don't
years.
bet on it.
You know, that's the amazing thing, Earl. We keep thinking, how in the world can there have been so many changes in our lifetime? I mean, it's been a very exciting time to be alive.
Yes.
To see so many things happening, and they're happening faster and faster and faster. But, you know, as Jan, you just pointed out, don't bet that there won't be as many changes in the next...
But you can't fathom what they would be.
You can't imagine. But, I mean, what do they say? If you can imagine it, it can happen.
It'll happen.
So, we'll see. I want to thank you again for so much for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Thank
we
you.
enjoyed it.
Real pleasure.